In today's video, we're taking a look at Frank Seravalli's top 15 trade bait board for the upcoming NHL trade season. It should be getting underway here soon. We should see at least a few trades ahead of the holiday freeze. The rest will likely come afterwards towards the NHL trade deadline. Plus, we also have a trade earlier today between the Blackhawks and the Sabres and some more players on the COVID protocol list. We'll discuss all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL trade rumors we're going to be taking a look at here, including the top 15 players likely to be moved ahead of the NHL trade deadline, according to NHL insider Frank Seravalli. Before we jump into that list, a couple other quick details here. First up, we had a trade earlier today. It was a fairly minor deal, but the Chicago Blackhawks have traded goaltender Malcolm Subban, who's been mostly playing at the American Hockey League level. He is traded to the Buffalo Sabres for future considerations. We know the Sabres have had nothing but issues when it comes to goaltending, and obviously they could use some extra help between the pipes. At this point, I'm not really sure that Malcolm Subban is going to be a huge help. I mean, he hasn't been really playing the best. His stats in the AHL are not the greatest. I believe he's played around 80 NHL games. Stats are not great. He's a fringe player at best, in my opinion, but either way, he's traded now, no longer in the Hawks' plans. We'll have to wait and see what the Sabres do for any more future long-term goaltending issues. At some point here, hopefully Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen gets a chance to take over, but I'm not sure if they feel he's completely ready for that just yet. Now, when it comes to some other players landing themselves on the COVID protocol list, a few players in Montreal will not be available, including Brendan Gallagher and Sami Niku. They're on the protocol list, and as well as Blues goalie Jordan Binnington. So that's a big blow to St. Louis. They're going to have to dress an emergency backup goaltender tonight, which will be the backup situation. I'm not sure that he'll actually end up playing or not. It'll depend on how Ville Husso does and how hopefully he can stay healthy and get through the game. But ultimately, they've had to go to that. So this is the first time in a while we've seen that scenario unfold. Now, jumping into the article put out today by Frank Seravalli on dailyfaceoff.com, let's take a look at the top 15 current trade bait lists according to Seravalli and see what we think here in some of these players. Some of these names might actually surprise you, many of which are names we've talked about off and on over the last number of weeks. Number one is Joonas Korpisalo. So these are in the order he feels they're likely to be moved here. So Korpisalo, we know, has long been rumored to be moved by the Columbus Blue Jackets. It was forever linked to the Edmonton Oilers. I'm not sure what the Oilers are going to do when it comes to goaltending. Clearly, Koskinen's been doing relatively well, better than many of us ever expected. Stuart Skinner's given them some good games, and Mike Smith's absence as well. I'm not sure what the Edmonton Oilers do, but I think right now they should be feeling pretty good about themselves when it comes to how the regular season is going to go and a chance to win in the playoffs. Wouldn't be shocked, depending on the health of Smith, if they do add another goalie. And like I said, Korpisalo's long been rumored to be a guy that they've looked at, but it's really difficult to say. He is likely going to end up somewhere. There's plenty of teams out there who need goaltending help. We reference Buffalo. We know Arizona's in that mix. And there are other teams as well. It's not necessarily just teams that are heading to the playoffs looking for depth. There's plenty of other teams in that same sort of boat. And Korpisalo's young enough that if he can get his game on track here, he very well could be a great help for a team, not only for this year, but beyond. Number two is Jake Debrusk. Of course, we know in Boston he wants out. That's been publicly confirmed by his agent as well as the player. And it's time for the Boston Bruins to hopefully honor that request and finally move Debrusk, who's really been in this rumor mill for the bulk of the last two seasons. However, Debrusk right now is even in a situation where he has to play because of the COVID protocol situation with their American Hockey League team. They're unable to call players up. But Debrusk apparently has generated lots of interest since this trade request was made public. All kinds of teams, and we've heard 8 to 10 teams already calling. At this point, he hasn't really been linked to any specific team. Like I said, there's lots of interest in a young player who not long ago scored 27 goals. So Debrusk definitely going to be on the move. It's a matter of where and when, not if. Definitely going to happen, but difficult to say exactly where he goes at this point in time. At number 3, Seravalli has Blues forward Vladimir Tarasenko, indicating that he still has not rescinded his trade request. And even though he's been a good soldier for them and smiled and played well, he still very much wants a trade out of the Blues organization. He's put up 19 points in 22 games, and he's proven a lot of doubters wrong about his health. He looks relatively good out there. Doesn't look like the shoulder is an issue any longer. He's putting up points, which at the same time has been helpful for the Blues. So you have to think that they might be reluctant to move the player at this point, because they obviously are relatively happy with how their season's going, and they don't want to weaken themselves any further. So it would largely depend on the return. But at the same time, Tarasenko is putting up these numbers, playing a lot, even on a fair bit on the third line. So it's hard to say. I know at one point he was heavily linked to a team like the Rangers or the Flyers. Where those teams stand right now, it's hard to say. There could be a need, but they would certainly have to have a fair bit of money going out. Doug Armstrong was reluctant to retain salary, which is a big part of the problem why it never happened in the offseason. But at this point, Tarasenko still wants a trade. He's certainly getting interest because he's playing well and looks healthy, which is great. But it might be difficult for the Blues to pull off as long as they're in the playoff mix. If things change for them down as the season prolongs itself here, maybe things change. But I wouldn't be shocked if this one actually waits for the offseason. At number 4, he's got Leafs defenseman Justin Holl. Now, of course, with Justin Holl being a healthy scratch on occasion here lately, this is also going to boil down to some salary cap gymnastics that the Leafs are going to need to pull off. Right now, they have Jack Campbell carrying the load, one of the best goaltenders in the NHL this season, which is certainly helping them be a big part of their major winning streak and winning ways that they've had here over the last number of weeks. But at some point in the near future, they're going to have to activate other goaltender Peter Mrazek, who's been on injury reserve for some time, only appearing in a couple of games so far this season after signing a 3-year contract with the Maple Leafs as a free agent goalie. And of course, they don't have the room right now to activate him. So clearly, they're going to have to make some moves to make it happen. One easy move to make a little bit of room would be to demote Kyle Clifford. That's an easy one. That's not going to be enough. Another player is going to have to be either demoted, traded, or waived off the roster to make the space necessary. Timothy Liljegren's another guy who in the past would have been the easy target to demote, but at this point he's playing well enough in the regular role that the Leafs likely don't want to do that. So obviously Justin Holl becomes expendable to a degree. Travis Dermott is as well, but the Sarah Valley references the fact that Hall is a little bit older and would be the preferred one to be moved. Also because of the cap hit, he makes a little bit more money and he's older, so it only makes sense from a getting younger and freeing up space perspective that Hall would be the more likely target to go. So at the same time, that you can never have too many defensemen for the playoffs. And even though Hall kind of hasn't been as much of a regular as he was before, they just might not be able to afford to keep him. Now, the other option, if they don't do a Justin Holl trade, would be to consider putting Wayne Simmons on waivers, or a guy like Nick Ritchie. Somebody else would have to go. And they all kind of have their roles, their spots. It's really hard to say. It makes more sense for a guy like Hall who hasn't been playing as much, right? So we'll see, but the Leafs are going to have to do something, and Sarah Valley feels a Justin Holl trade is the most likely to make the room to bring in Mrazek off of LTIR. Now, number 5, he's got Rangers disgruntled rookie Vitaly Kravtsov, the former first-round pick of the Rangers, currently back in Russia in the KHL. Obviously, awaiting a trade. Right now, we know that there's a good chance that Kravtsov won't return to the NHL until probably in the spring when the KHL season is wrapped up. That's pretty much a given. But will it be with the Rangers or will it be elsewhere? Many feel, including Sarah Valley, that there's still going to be lots of interest in this player, and that certainly the odds are still good the Rangers will move him. Now, of course, he references the possibility of reuniting him with his former GM, Jeff Gorton, who's now taking over the executive vice president role with the Montreal Canadiens. Of course, there's a good possibility, at least rumors suggest, that they may be taking the Habs down the road of a rebuild, and adding a guy like Kravtsov would be a nice addition. Obviously, we know the Rangers have been long linked to adding another top 6 forward, somebody who can replace Sammy Blais, who's injured and out for the season. Montreal would have a lot of players that fall into that category that would certainly be able to accommodate the needs of the Rangers. So whether that be Armia or Toffoli or Hoffman or any of those guys, it's hard to say who would be the preferred target. We'd have to look at salary cap and money, make it work that way too. So it's hard to say, but Montreal would have the forwards that they would be interested in for sure. Now, it doesn't mean that's where it's going to happen, but it's just a potential, connection there between Gorton and Kravtsov. Obviously, Gorton was involved with the drafting of him. Obviously, was a fan. It was the previous regime, including Gorton and Davidson, who seemed to give Kravtsov the impression, I'm not sure if it was a promise or not, that he would be on the roster. And of course, they're not there now, and Drury has different plans along with coach Gerard Gallant. So obviously, we'll see where that goes, but that might be a potential landing spot for him given the changes we've seen in the NHL lately. Number 6 was a bit of a surprise, but not too shocking if you really examine the situation, and that is Florida Panthers forward Patrick Hornqvist, of course, who's got tons of experience. The former Penguin, got numerous Stanley Cups to his name now. His playing time has greatly diminished this year after having a real solid year, played a big role for Florida last year, but with all the changes they've made, this year it hasn't been kind to Hornqvist. He's played a lot on the fourth line, limited to a little bit of a specialty player on the power play a little bit. Point totals are down. Playing time is down. He's down to 1 year left on his contract at $5.3 million. He does have a modified no trade where he can block 8 teams. So there'll be a little bit of control on his part. But certainly Hornqvist is a guy that Florida would mainly move to free up some cap space so they could add another player who they would feel more comfortable giving a bigger role to. We've seen GM Bill Zito make a lot of good moves when it comes to cap saving space. He was able to move on from the Brett Connolly contract. He was able to move Anton Stroman. This is a couple of examples there, so maybe he'll be able to do this one as well. I mean, Hornqvist still, to me, has value. Still a guy who plays really hard and can be tough to play against, so I would think contending teams with all his pedigree and experience would have interest. So we'll see where that goes as well. Number 7 is JT Miller in Vancouver. Of course, we've seen the Canucks win the last couple of games, but I don't think it's really, too big of a reason to get excited just yet, considering who they were playing in Montreal and Ottawa, 2 of the other lower-ranked teams in the NHL. So we'll see if they can get some wins against some more, better, stronger teams here, and then maybe we can say things are, progressing towards getting turned around. But for right now, teams are circling on Vancouver. They have a lot of players, including Miller, who's drawing a lot of interest, including a former team of his with the New York Rangers. We know the Minnesota Wild were interested as well, and either of those teams would make a really solid potential landing spot for him. Hard to say where he goes, but there's lots and lots of interest. 1 more year left at $5.25 million with what he brings to the table, the intensity, the skill, the points. I think he'll definitely get moved as long as things don't drastically turn around in Vancouver in a hurry. 8 Cervelli has Hawks center iceman Dylan Strome. Of course, he's been getting more playing time with the new coaching change there in Chicago. Derek King's giving him more of an opportunity. I'm still not entirely convinced that Strome fits in the Hawks' long-term future plans, though, and that maybe he and Kyle Davidson, the new interim GM, maybe might have more of a plan to kind of showcase him. Hopefully he plays better for, creating some more value for him to have a better chance to trade him. Like I said, I'm not entirely convinced that he really is going to get a ton of interest around the NHL. I'm also not entirely convinced he fits with Chicago's future plans. So a trade is certainly possible. It wouldn't be a big trade unless there was other pieces involved by any means, but still a player who could generate some interest if he plays well enough over the next little while. At number 9, he's got Riley Smith of the Vegas Golden Knights, another potential guy who could land up in the Rangers organization. The Rangers are connected to a lot of these guys. We know that they've been looking for a top 6 forward, and you throw in the potential of Tarasenko, you throw in a guy like, somebody who can come over from Montreal for Kravtsov, and now you look at Riley Smith. Vegas and the Rangers could hook up on another trade, and he could rejoin former Vegas teammate Ryan Reeves and former head coach Gerard Gallant in the Big Apple here. I mean, clearly the Vegas Golden Knights are going to have to move money as well. Like I said about Toronto, Vegas has Jack Eichel on LTIR, and the hope is he'll be able to return here for the last couple months of the season. And if that's the case, money has to be cleared out. Riley Smith's a pending UFA who seems unlikely to be returning to the Golden Knights at this point. Given the relationship to Gallant and Reeves, it makes sense that they would have interest there. And I don't know who they bring in, but whether it's Miller or Smith or somebody from Montreal or Tarasenko, they're likely going to be doing something. They're not going to be doing all of these trades, but it's fair to say that the Rangers are certainly keeping their options open, are likely having a long look at a lot of potential players in this category. But again, Riley Smith makes a lot of sense. Certainly a player out of Vegas that I would really think is a good chance to get moved, along with Braden McNabb. I throw him in there as well. And speaking of Jack Eichel, he has been spotted skating today. Now, at this point, there's no reason to believe his timetable for a return is changed. I think it's still quite a ways off. But the fact is that he's had his surgery. and at least he's skating. So that means things are on track and at least progressing, which is obviously good news. Number 10, we've got Bryan Rust out of Pittsburgh, pending UFA. I think this is going to largely depend on whether or not the Penguins are in the playoff picture or not. I think if they're in the playoff picture, they get Malkin back. I don't see them trading Bryan Rust, even though they might be at risk to lose him in the offseason, where he is a pending UFA. I can see the Penguins being in go-for-it mode yet again. This team has had ups and downs this year, and we'll see. But if the Penguins are falling out of the playoff picture, it makes a lot of sense that Bryan Rust, and the former 30-goal guy, could be on the move. I can see there'd be lots of interest in this player, and it's not surprising he's on Saravalli's list. But to me, this is one that should be having a little asterisk next to it saying only if things are falling down and the Penguins are missing the playoffs. Number 11, you get Rickard Rakell in Anaheim. And of course, there's some other pending UFAs along with Rakell, like Josh Manson, like Hampus Lindholm, who could also be moved. But the Ducks have certainly been a bit of a surprise team this year. Dallas Eakins has the team playing very well. Of course, we've seen Bob Murray be dismissed as GM because of that whole investigation and other stuff that was going on. So we'll have to see where things go and how they handle things now. But out of the three pending UFAs with experience here on the Ducks roster, Saravalli feels that Rakell is the most likely to get moved. Of course, he missed some time, but since coming back, has played relatively well and put up some points. So we'll see where that goes. Rakell could be an excellent middle six pickup for a variety of teams. A guy who can be versatile in where he plays and what role he plays. Decent 200-foot player as well. So we'll see where that goes. Number 12, he's got Sharks center iceman Tomas Hertl. Of course, again, the Sharks had a great start, but have kind of normalized here a little bit. Hertl is another pending UFA who remains, a lot of speculation over his future in the Sharks organization. There's not really been any talks about contract extension talks, so we'll see where that goes. But Hertl's another guy who would make an excellent, number 2 center for a lot of teams if they want an upgrade, or number 3 going into the playoffs. I wouldn't be shocked if a team like Boston took a chance on Hertl. Maybe a Hertl for Debrusk type of trade is something that we see. Now, of course, that might not be ideal given the fact that Hertl's a little bit older than Debrusk, but it might be something that works out for both sides. Number 13, we've got Phil the Thrill Kessel in Arizona, still waiting for his wish to be granted here. He's asked for a trade as well, like Debrusk, has yet to get it, but it wasn't because of lack of trying. Apparently the Coyotes did try hard to move Kessel in the offseason, but there just wasn't a lot of interest, given the fact that what his cap hit is, even though his salary is really low, teams would not have to spend much, but they'd have to have the necessary space to take him on, which over $6 million, which is certainly an issue. But if the Coyotes retain, when we get closer to the deadline, it'll make things a little bit easier. At number 14, we've got Hawks youngster Henrik Borgstrom, who came over from the Florida Panthers, as well as the incentive for them to take on the Brett Connolly contract. At this point, Borgstrom hasn't exactly worked out. After having a solid collegiate hockey career at the University of Denver, he hasn't really been able to put it all together at the NHL level. And if another team wants to take a chance on him, again, another player that, to me, he could get moved, but he could also wait and see where things go. I don't see there being a ton of interest there. In number 15, he's got Evander Kane. Now, I've heard different reports on where things stand with Kane. According to Saravalli, he doesn't seem convinced that there'll be very many teams that are going to want to take on Kane because of all the baggage and other off-ice issues that comes with them. And I would think he makes a lot of great points that way. And personally, I don't really disagree with him. But then you listen to an ESPN reporter like Emily Kaplan today, who was saying that there was lots of teams that would be interested in Kane at a reduced salary. If San Jose retains 50% and it's under 3.5, she said there's lots of interest. And if you take a third-party team to broker the deal to retain another 50% and knock it down further, that they're going to be lined up out the door. Saravalli doesn't seem convinced of this because of the distraction and all the off-ice issues. So we'll see. At this point, Evander Kane is still in the middle of the legal battles with his soon-to-be ex or estranged wife, whatever you want to refer to her as. There was a lot more information through the courts that have come out. His wife has made a lot more public statements about him again as well. Things are getting even messier in public. The custody of the child's at play here too, which is unfortunate. He has some kind of special circumstances with the AHL team, the Barracuda, where he's now reported to. Apparently it looks like he's only playing home games or something. It's going to be tough to do an Evander Kane trade, to be honest. And as much as it's something we can talk about, I'm not completely convinced either that it's going to happen. And I certainly would caution any NHL team to be extremely careful before they pull the trigger because of the potential distraction and locker room disruption that could become. So those are your top 15 players on the trade bait list according to Frank Cervelli as of right now. He does feel that we're likely bound to see at least a few deals before the holiday freeze up just before Christmas. And of course, a lot of these other players will likely get moved closer to the deadline. So let me know what your thoughts are. Were some potential landing spots for these players, and we'll talk about it further in the comments. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.